Right now, the Middle East is engulfed in flames, missile strikes, a boiling Red Sea, and collapsing global trade routes. But in the midst of this chaos, there is one absolute anomaly, a state that controls the planet's main oil artery, yet one that Tehran, and indeed anyone else, doesn't even dare to touch. Just 50 years ago, they lived in an isolated Middle Ages, and today, they are making an economic leap more powerful than Singapore's. And while their Gulf neighbors are obsessively measuring the height of their skyscrapers, Oman is building smart, green cities not for the Guinness World Records, but for the real comfort of its citizens. How did they become the untouchable Switzerland of the Middle East? And what is the secret behind this phenomenon? Let's be honest, our knowledge of the Arabian Peninsula often boils down to a set of stereotypes. There was an endless desert, Bedouins walked across it with camels, then oil gushed from under the sand, and they built over everything with glass towers. For Dubai, Qatar, or Riyadh, this is largely true. The historical centers there are often newly built. But Oman breaks this mold from the very first seconds. First of all, it's not entirely a desert. The state is reliably fenced off from the endless sands by a rugged mountain range. And while the asphalt melts at plus 50 degrees Celsius during summer in the neighboring Emirates, a climate miracle happens in the south of Oman. That's where Kharif, the monsoon season, begins. Dry valleys are suddenly covered with dense green jungles. Waterfalls cascade down the mountains, and locals wrap themselves in jackets against the cool and fog. But the mountains are just a wall behind their backs. Oman's face has always been turned toward the ocean, and that determined everything. While other Arab tribes spent centuries stewing in the internal conflicts of the Middle East, the Omanis built ships. Thousands of years ago, a mighty maritime power flourished here. Local craftsmen created the famous wooden dhow ships, on which Arab merchants sailed to India, Africa, and even China. The Omanis were so successful that they became the only Arab state in history to have true overseas colonies. At its peak, the Omani Empire controlled vast territories in East Africa, owned Zanzibar, and dictated its own rules in the Indian Ocean. But every empire sooner or later collapses, and Oman's fall was incredibly painful. Having lost its colonies and fleet, by the mid-20th century, the once great empire had turned into one of the poorest, most forgotten, and closed-off places on the planet. Imagine the 1960s. The whole world is listening to the Beatles, sending a man into space, and building nuclear power plants. But Oman is ruled by a paranoid sultan, Saeed bin Taimur, who literally plunged the country into darkness. He banned everything. New goods could not be imported into the country. Sunglasses, radios, cigarettes, medicines, and even riding a bicycle were forbidden. People were not allowed to talk on the street for more than 15 minutes, lest they plot a conspiracy. After sunset, the heavy wooden gates of the capital, Muscat, were simply bolted shut. The entire country had exactly 3 schools and 10 kilometers of paved roads. Even when oil was discovered in Oman, the Sultan wouldn't allow foreign companies to extract it, and he reportedly kept the meager revenues in trunks under his bed. The country was bursting at the seams. In the south, a Marxist rebellion, supported by the USSR and China, was already blazing. It seemed Oman would simply disappear from the map. But in 1970, an event occurs that changes the course of history. The Sultan's son, 30-year-old Prince Qaboos, having received a brilliant education in Europe, returns to his homeland. His father, terrified by his son's progressive views, immediately places him under house arrest for 6 whole years. It is exactly in this isolation that Qaboos realizes, if nothing is done, the country will perish. With the secret support of the British, the young prince organizes a bloodless coup d'etat. He overthrows his own father, takes power into his own hands, and opens the country's doors. People in Oman still say that their true history began precisely in 1970. Before that, there simply was no light. Qaboos began a grand construction effort. Revenues from oil, which had finally started to be properly extracted, poured into infrastructure. The UN officially recognizes, over the next 40 years, the standard of living in Oman grew more than in any other country in the world, surpassing even the economic miracles of South Korea and China. But wait. Everyone in the Middle East has oil. So why didn't Oman become a second Dubai? Why aren't they building giant towers here? And why did Sultan Qaboos legally ban the construction of commercial buildings higher than the minaret of the main mosque? The answer lies in a unique mentality and a religion that has no parallels in the region. We have all heard about Sunnis and Shiites. Their centuries-old confrontation is the fuel for most conflicts in the Middle East, including the proxy wars between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But Oman practices Ibadism. This is a third, extremely rare branch of Islam. Ibadis have historically avoided political squabbles. At the core of their philosophy are compromise, moderation, and the right to choose a leader based on their actual merits, rather than by bloodline. It is exactly this philosophy that made Oman the perfect geopolitical broker. While its neighbors sponsor factions all over the region, Oman keeps a cool head. When the Islamic Revolution happened in Iran, Oman did not sever relations with them. Oman became the first Arab country to host the Prime Minister of Israel. It was within closed Omani residences that the most complex secret negotiations between the US and Iran over the nuclear deal took place. They refused to participate in the blockade of Qatar and did not send troops to neighboring Yemen. But now Oman faces its ultimate challenge: life after oil. And while its neighbors are building over deserts with ultra-expensive glass mirages, Oman is breaking the rules again. Their Vision 2040 strategy is not about showing off, but about survival. Instead of artificial decorations, they are betting on historical authenticity and their own citizens. Unlike the Emirates, where 90% of the population are expats, Oman launched a strict Omanization policy. Want to do business? You're obliged to hire locals. The country is fundamentally growing its own engineers and doctors. What does the future look like for a state that invests in people rather than Guinness World Records? Now I'll show you their main megaprojects. Project 1. Sultan Haitham City. These are 19 districts in the capital managed by artificial intelligence. But the AI here isn't just for show. The city literally feels its residents. The control center collects data from millions of sensors. If the system sees through smartwatches that people's heart rates and stress levels are massively rising in a certain area, the algorithm automatically changes the street lighting and turns on relaxing music in the parks. The heart of the city will be a huge park on the site of a dried riverbed, which will act as a natural sponge, protecting neighborhoods from floods. Project 2. The Muscat Waterfront by Zaha Hadid Architects. Budget: $1.3 billion, covering an area the size of 450 football fields. Instead of tearing down historical buildings, they are integrating them into the new environment. Here, they are building natural street ventilation systems that work like a giant open-air air conditioner, collecting rainwater and launching water taxis along special canals. The architecture doesn't overwhelm a person. It protects them from the scorching sun. Project 3. Omani Mountain Destination, the city in the cloud. At an altitude of 2,400 meters in the mountains, a colossal resort and residential cluster for 8,000 people is being created. No damage to nature. Everything runs on solar and wind energy. Extreme sports, agroparks where fresh produce is grown right on the cliffs, training centers for professional athletes, and absolute integration into the mountain landscape. Having walked the path from a downtrodden, slave-owning country with just 3 schools to a cutting-edge, stable state, they have learned the main lesson. Technologies should serve people and nature, not the ego of a ruler. By preserving ancient forts right next to solar panels and choosing the path of negotiations over wars, Oman has become the true hidden gem of the Middle East. What do you think? Whose approach to the future will turn out to be more successful? The endless, insane construction projects of Saudi Arabia, or the calm, calculated path of Oman? Share your opinion in the comments. Hit the like button on this video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories about how our world is changing. See you next time!